So I'm delighted to be invited to give the kickstart talk on the land meeting workshops. My name is Ioannis Bakolis. I'm based at the Institute of Psychiatry, Psychology and Neuroscience at King's College London. And in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to present recent work and recent findings from the 1946 birth cohort in relation to associations between area disadvantage and mental health. And this is a fruitful collaboration between the product of fruitful collaboration between the Institute of Psychiatry, where I'm based, and the MRC unit for lifelong health and aging, and particularly with Emily and Marcus as well, who are part today of this group. All right. I'll start my presentation by saying that mental health is one of the biggest challenges that we faced in the 21st century. According to recent estimates from the Adult Psychiatric and Morbidity Survey, 1 adult in 6 in 2004 were identified as having a common mental disorder. And there's an increasing trend, especially in women, when we are comparing these estimates, this prevalence with the surveys that have been held in 2007 and 2000. And most importantly, we know that people with severe mental illness in the UK have 15 to 20 years reduced life expectancy compared to the overall population. And these estimates are not only in relation to adults, but we're seeing that in children as well, that 1 in 6 children in 2020, according to the Mental Health Children Youth Survey, in 2020 were identified as having a probable mental disorder. And this is an increase from 2017, where the similar survey were observed 1 in 9 children. There are some obvious reasons for this kind of increasing trend in children, especially for example, for increased usage of social media and other risk factors. However, the place of residence as well, the neighborhood that the children are living in, the adults, is equally worth our attention. And this is not only this temporal trends in mental health is not only something that we're observing from snapshots in time, like these national surveys are actually depicting, but this evidence are coming from the recent work that happened between the historical birth cohorts. So this is a very recent paper published last month, where the authors looked at the prevalence of psychological distress across the different birth cohorts, the 1946, the 1958, and the 1970, where participants of the 1970 presented increased psychological distress compared to the other cohorts based on the paper. And we're not only seeing some temporal trends in relation to mental health, but there are some special patterns in mental health that we can see not only at national level, but also at kind of more localized level. This map is taken from a paper published from PhD, from Kate Pauling, from a PhD student that I supervised, and she recently had her viva. Where the PhD looked at different standard admission rates of self-harm across Southeast London, where the institute is operating. So this is a map of Southwark, Lambeth, Croydon, and Lewisham, and what we're seeing in the map is the admissions rates of self-harm at LSOA level across the different boroughs. Where after adjusting for neighborhood deprivation and other neighborhood indicators, we still see some special patterning in terms of self-harm rates. This special temporal pattern and the fact that living in a disadvantaged area, it's not a new hypothesis. This goes back from the fire syndrome hypothesis back in 1930s. And in the last 15 years, there are at least 5 systematic reviews that they're looking at neighborhood effects in longitudinal studies and their associations with health and well-being. And the most recent one actually being conducted from the organizer of today's workshop as well. And there are different types of hypotheses that we have why living in a disadvantaged area could have an impact on mental health. For example, through lack of community resources, or through environmental stressors, such as built environment variables, such as air pollution or noise pollution, or lack of green spaces, or more social stressors, such as violent crime or neighborhood disorder. And how are these associations and how the place of residence are being interlinked with mental health over the life course is quite of our interest, and especially what would be the sensitive periods that we might potentially observe this association. For example, is it area disadvantage at early life, that is it's associated with mental health over the life course, or area disadvantage at midlife or later life? Is it a specific time of exposure, or is it an accumulation of area level effects that are more impactful towards mental health? And what would be the potential effect modifier? What would be the particular individual characteristics, for example, the individual socioeconomic status, that could actually have a more pronounced effect to these associations? So with all this background in mind, we used data from the National Health and Development Survey, or else I would like to call it the 1946 birth cohort, where a sample of 5,362 Sigladon births in a week in 1946 were followed over time until nowadays. Where we had repeated, where we linked repeated measures of area level measures in terms of area disadvantage in ages 4, 26, 53, and 16, 64. And we defined area disadvantage as the percentage of employed persons in each area district level with occupations that were partly skilled or unskilled. And we link that with mental health related outcomes that we have over different age periods. And these were with teacher and participant reports at age 13 and 15, with a clinical interview that took place at age 36, and with self-reported questionnaires, which took place from age 43 and onwards. And we use the two-step linkage of residential address to area disadvantage, and this is more like a kind of a brief summary of the of a quite long work that been done to link actually this different data, not only with our project but with other projects within the 1946, where automated matching was carried out on residential address to assign an X and Y coordinate, and the generated coordinates were used to link the area data from the closed census at its age that we have area level disadvantage metrics. And as a measure of area disadvantage, we used two different types of measures: percentage of employed persons in each area, with occupations that were partly skilled or unskilled. And also, we used a change score in percentage of area level disadvantage over time, which this change score would be the difference between area disadvantage in percentages between, let's say, age 4 and age 26, and age 4 and age 53, and age 4 and age 60. So our main hypothesis, we wanted to have an overall look of these pathways over the life course. So we had 4 distinct hypotheses, where our first hypothesis, we wanted to look at area disadvantage at early age, at age 4, and prospective associations, potential prospective associations with mental health at age 13, with mental health at adolescence and adult and midlife and later life. Also, we wanted to explore as our second distinct hypothesis if area disadvantage at adult life was associated with adult mental health and in midlife and later life, and also if if living in an area which has an increasing area disadvantage, if there is a potential association with mental health again on adult life. And also a fourth hypothesis, we wanted to test for effect modifiers of this association by individual socioeconomic status and gender. And this is a brief depiction of the sample characteristics that we have, and what we can actually take. What we can see from this table is that area disadvantage in 2006, for example, was quite lower when we compared with the 1950s, as we expected as well. So when we wanted to test our first hypothesis, which was if early area level disadvantage was associated with poor adolescence and adult mental health, we looked at area disadvantage at age 4 and mental health at age 13 and 15, 36 and 43, 53, 60, 64, and 69. So we test these prospective associations. We test them with the use of two-level linear and ordinary multi-level models, in this case where each participant of the 1946 birth cohort, which was included in our sample of data, was nested within the areas that we are observing. And for our models, we used 3 different levels of adjustments. From unadjusted models to adjusted for childhood socioeconomic position, and further adjusted for cognitive ability at age 15. And what we found was that area disadvantage in childhood at age 4 was associated with increased risk of poorer mental health at age 13 and 15, but we didn't observe any further association for other ages over the life course of the participants. We wanted then to test our second hypothesis, for example, which was if area disadvantage at different stages in adulthood was associated with poorer adult mental health. And this was the pathways we're trying to look at. And in this case, we looked at if area disadvantage at age 26 was associated with mental health at ages 36, 43, 53, 60, 64, and 69, and if area disadvantage at age 53 subsequently was associated with mental health at ages 60, 64, and 69, and similar with area disadvantage at age 60. In this case, we use a different modeling approach. We use a cross-classified models instead of nested models, and we used a different type of adjustments as well, where we are further adjusting for childhood and adult socioeconomic position, as well as educational attainment at age 26. And just a very quick difference between the cross-classified models that we used is that the cross-classified, as the nested models, have a particular level of hierarchy where participants are nested within the areas. In the cross-classified model, we are assuming different hierarchies across the different areas, and these different area effects are fitted all together. And what we observe when we run our cross-classified models to examine associations between area disadvantage at adult life and potential associations with adult mental health, we found for area disadvantage in early adulthood at age 26, that participants had an increased risk of mental health symptoms at age 60, 64 and age 69 only, and we didn't observe any further associations besides that. And when we looked at our third hypothesis, which was if increasing area disadvantage over time was associated with poorer adult mental health, and observing these pathways, and we tried to look at that by using the change score in percentages between area disadvantage at age 4 and age 26, an area disadvantage at age 4 and age 53, an area disadvantage at age 4 and age 60, with the subsequent mental health measures that we had over the adult life of the participants. In this case, we use a similar cross-classified models for the change scores in area disadvantage, and we use the same type of adjustments. And what we observed that if we use the difference in percentages between age 4 and age 26 in area disadvantage, we observe an increased risk of poorer mental health with mental health at age 42. And when we used our change scores between area at age 4 and age 53, we observe an increase. We were presenting a mean difference between mental health at age 53 and age 63. So our main findings from our work was that we were partly consistent with our first hypothesis. So we observed that early area disadvantage was associated with poorer adolescents' mental health. We also observed, partly consistent with our second hypothesis, we also observed the study members who reside in disadvantaged areas, young adults, had an increased risk of poorer mental health at age 60, 64 and 69. Fairly consistent with our third hypothesis, we observed that moving into or continue residing into an area that becomes more disadvantaged from early life to adulthood was associated with increased risk of poorer adult mental health. And something that, from the pressure of time, I wouldn't present today, we looked at some positive association of area disadvantage with poorer mental health. These positive associations were more pronounced in participants from a manual social class, especially for their early life findings and later life. Our study has some considerable strengths, and I think one of the major strengths is that we have an unusual long follow-up period. It's quite novel follow-up when it comes to neighborhood effects. Our sample is based on the national population cohort, and we have prospectively obtained outcomes and covariates at the same time, which is obviously the strength of any type of birth cohort. Some limitations is that there is a selective attrition of those who are less social advantaged and less healthy in the 1946 birth cohort, and mental health could be a predictor of the attrition that we have in our sample. There is a level of exposure misclassification, so our unit of geography here is district level. However, we know that district level geography is a quite aggregated area, and especially if we discuss about urban areas within the UK, this will not be the geographical ideal geographical unit for defining a neighborhood effect. And we have different mental health measures which are differing over the life the life course. And I think building on that, I mean, like some future research challenges that I'm personally seeing in my view is like from this type of research and from some future research, I think it's more like if we have to boil it down in terms of geography, and I think this is something that we recognize, and this is why this group is actually been set up, and that's why we are probably here today, is first that we need quite a high resolution of what we call a neighborhood effect, and a quite well-grounded definition of how we define neighborhoods, and not only in our recent years of how we can go back historically around this. and how far back in time we have been that, and that must be, and that it is very challenging. And also which particular aspects of, let's say, neighborhood effects are actually being associated with mental health. For example, is it air pollution? Is it noise pollution? Is it lack of green spaces, as I mentioned before? And how feasible it is and how pragmatic it is to go back in time. On regards of the, apart from what the challenges are in regards to the geographical units that we're using, there's also the challenges around the harmonization of the work that has been happening within the longitudinal cohorts, and this is work that is being driven by Marcus' research about how we can harmonize as well the mental health measures and cognitive measures across the cohorts, and this will provide a new database of how we can look not only at age effects but as well as cross-cohort effects in relation to mental health. And if we, I mean, one of the challenges of this work was how we can actually explore all this association, and the cross-classified model is quite complicated models to fit. If we start thinking about structural equation models and multi-level mediation analysis to actually underpin these associations between, let's say, what we call as a neighborhood effect and what we call as a mental health effect, it actually presents a lot of statistical challenges to do that, which we need to have in mind. And there is also the issue of missing data and sample attrition as well, which is already a lot of work underway on the longitudinal birth cohorts. And I think the future challenges as well, in a certain extent, I mean, it's important to convince the funders to overcome that as well, because it's not only the fact that if we're able to give some scientific basis around these associations around neighborhood and mental health, it will help us to build more effective intervention. But I think more it changed the paradigm and the notion that mental health as well as physical health is not only related to the individual, but it's also related to the place that we're living, which needs to be more adequately researched. And thank you very much. That's all from me. And there are some few references we used towards the presentation.